Okay, so I'm about to feed my starter and also start a sponge. So first let's do the feeding. I've got a clean jar actually, and this is my starter here. And so for feeding, I fed this last week. It's kind of, you can see it's kind of bubbly. So maybe just take a spoon, just kind of give it a little mix. And then I have a half cup measure here. So I'm just going to scoop out a half a cup of starter into my measuring cup. And it doesn't have to be exact. I kind of usually put a little bit more than a half. So just like that. Helps if you have a little spatula thing. So put that in your new jar. And you don't have to use a clean jar. I usually use a jar for maybe 2 or 3 feedings, and then the top kind of gets a bit crusty, and that's sort of when I switch to a clean jar. But you definitely don't have to use a clean jar every time. Okay, and then now I take some water that's about room temperature. It can be even like a little bit warmer than room temperature. Now this water I actually boiled because your tap water has chlorine in it, and I read that chlorine could inhibit the yeast and bacteria, which ultimately prevents like your starter from growing and bubbling. So by boiling it, you effectively remove the chlorine, and then you can just like let it cool down to room temperature. Okay, so we put a half cup of starter. We need a half cup of water. Oops, it's spilling everywhere. And then pour that into your jar. Okay. And then you can kind of give it a little mix to incorporate the old starter and the water. And then I've got some all-purpose flour here. I just use all-purpose for my feeding. And so when you do the feeding, it's equal weights: water, starter, and flour. And so by weight, it's half cup starter, half cup water, and a scant cup of flour. And a scant cup is basically almost a cup of flour. Imagine a cup of flour minus a couple of tablespoons. So I've got a cup here, and it's not exactly full. Just put that into your jar. And then give that a little stir. And to be honest, I don't really spend a whole lot of time stirring this because it will ferment overnight, and it kind of just like mixes itself, I find. But I try to do like a good enough job, but don't spend a ton of time. So I'm just gonna put this aside. And that's pretty much it. Okay. Just try and get the majority. Just make sure I'm actually recording. Okay, I am. Can you imagine? So I have like a spoon and spatula situation going on. But okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm gonna leave my jar actually out on the counter overnight, and then in the morning I put it in the fridge. And for the remainder of the time until the next feeding, I keep this in the fridge. I'm just gonna clean up the sides of my jar because I'm neurotic. And that's it. So that's essentially the feeding. Just close that. Oh, here, I'll let you see the inside. So it kind of doesn't really look like what the starter that I used to look like, but tomorrow it will. So So I'm just going to close that airtight and just leave that out on the counter. So I've done the feeding, but now I'm left with still some starter in my old jar. And this stuff here is called the discard. It's called the discard because essentially you don't need it and you can discard it. But instead of throwing it all away, you can use this to make the sponge, or levain in French, to make your dough, which will be done tomorrow. So because it's just Adam and I'm only going to make one loaf. But to reduce the amount of discard, you could potentially make as many loaves as this amount allows you to. Now, to make a sponge, you need about 2 to 4 tablespoons of starter, and it doesn't have to be active. The reason why you make a sponge is basically you can keep using this in the fridge until it's empty. So this is right now in this state not active because this was fed 1 week ago. But by using this and then adding flour and water, you're basically feeding it just like you're feeding your jar of starter. And then tomorrow, this will be the sponge that you use to make your dough. So let's just use 4 tablespoons. I like to use 4 tablespoons. And I'm just using just a bowl here, just a regular soup bowl. So 1. 2, 3, and 4. And that could probably squeeze out another loaf, but I don't want to keep keeping discard in my fridge, so I'm just going to chuck it out. So this is officially a discard. Okay, so I got my 4 tablespoons of old starter in here, and I'm going to use the same previously boiled and now cooled water, so chlorine-free water. I'm going to put 2 tablespoons in. Okay, and it's very forgiving, so it doesn't have to be exact measurements. I'm going to put this too. And then, so I'm just going to try and incorporate that old starter, just get it kind of going in the water. So give it a little quick stir. And then I'm going to take a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And put that in. Give that a good little mix. And sometimes you'll notice, I don't know, sometimes my starter's a bit thicker some weeks and sometimes a bit thinner. You'll kind of get a feel for like what it should really look like. This today is a little bit on the thick side, but I'm going to leave it so we can see what it looks like in the morning. So that is basically it. So this is what it looks like in my bowl. Okay, kind of pasty, kind of sludgy, I don't know, just made that word up. And then now, I've got a beeswax wrap here. I'm just going to cover it as tightly as I can. Just like that. Get a good squeeze on the bottom, and then I'm just going to leave this out on the counter overnight as well. So this will be the sponge that we use for our dough. And that's that. So at the same time, I've fed my sourdough, which essentially is replenishing your stock, your supply of starter, and I have started a sponge using the discard. And I will see you in the morning.